Hi, I'm Amanda Webb, and welcome to Her Time, Her Place. This is a podcast about women stepping into their moment, owning their place, and sharing what it really took to get there. In each episode, I'll sit down with women from all walks of life to explore the turning points, the moments of doubt, the decisions that changed everything, the people who showed up, and the lessons they've carried forward. Because so many of us have been told, or have quietly told ourselves, that it's not the time. It's not the place, not yet. This podcast is all about questioning that, choosing it anyway, and discovering what's possible when we do. Let's go. Hi, and welcome to Her Time, Her Place. This week, I'm joined by Laura Berry. Laura, welcome.
Thanks. Lovely to be here.
It's great to have you here with me today. Laura has a very impressive portfolio career. She's a non-executive director with Taronga Zoo here in Sydney, on the board of Women for Election, and also Carriage Work, which is an arts centre in Sydney. She also has an executive past career and was the CEO of a really impressive First Nations organisation called Supply Nation, and I'm sure she will share a little bit about her work in that space. So Laura, I am so looking forward to this conversation with you because I've only known you for a short time and we only actually ever get to see each other occasionally in person at a board meeting and mostly online, but we don't know each other super well. So it's always great to unpack someone's story when you don't know so much about them.
Well, I'm looking forward to sharing it with you, and I've listened to a couple of these podcasts that you've already put out, and I think the conversations you have are really impressive with the ladies that you've been speaking to. So thanks for having me.
Well, I've been really lucky to ask fabulous women to do this, and they've said yes, that includes you. So I'm the one that's feeling very fortunate. So Laura, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Laura Berry story from the early days and the transition and journey to getting you to where you are today?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Canberra. So I think that's probably where my love of politics has come from, just growing up in the nation's capital and surrounded by politicians and parliament. I've got two sisters and went to my whole schooling career in Canberra, and then left school and went to university very briefly and realised actually maybe that wasn't for me at that point in time in my life. My parents at that time were in the process of splitting up. My younger sister was having some real difficulties in her life, and that was having a big impact on our family life. And it was quite chaotic, I would probably say. It was sort of unstructured, and I think I really am the type of person that enjoyed a structured school life. So when I left school and went off to university, and I suddenly had all this freedom, and we had people saying, you don't have to come to this lecture, someone else will give you the notes, or you can sit in the cafe and no one actually knows where you are. It just didn't really suit what I needed in my life at that time. So I was struggling, if I'm honest, as to what I was going to do and how I was not really coping with university life. And the mum of one of the girls that I went to school with gave me a call one day, and she worked in the ACT government, and she said, hey, I've got a job. It's only a 2-week little contract, but you have to have a driver's license in order to take the job on, and her daughter did not have a driver's license. And she said, would you like to come and do this job? You have to deliver the mail around the different offices of the bus company in Canberra, Action Buses. And it was good money back then, you know, like a government job, even for only a couple of weeks. And I said, oh yeah, great, I'll come and do that. So I went and took on that job, and that was a 2-week contract, and I ended up staying there for just over 4 years. So at the end of the 2 weeks, they moved me out of that role, and I got a little job in the corporate affairs kind of area of the organisation. And I just sort of worked my way up, and I eventually finished as the executive assistant to the chief executive of the organisation 4 years later. So that was kind of how my career started, and I never went back to undergraduate uni. So I thought, I love this. I love going to work every day. I love being in a place surrounded by people and learning new things. I really enjoyed being in the corporate affairs area of the organisation, learning about how the department interrelated with the government, ministerial letter writing, all that kind of stuff. And then moved up into the executive area. I'm an organised person by nature, so it really suited my personality to be an executive assistant and be involved in keeping someone's diary and taking notes in meetings and sitting in on management meetings with the union officials. And I found that really fascinating, watching that interaction between the union and the government. So I learnt a lot. I was really learning in a different way on the job. So that was sort of the early stages. And then every job after that was really because somebody said, hey, I think you'd be really good for this. Why don't you stick your hand up? So from there, I had another friend say, I've got a friend who's starting a new public affairs sort of lobbying firm here in Canberra, looking for an assistant and an office manager. Why don't you have a chat to him and see if you can maybe work for him? And it was right in my, like, it was government, it was politics, it was organisation, executive assistant work. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll give that a go. So I went and did that job, and that was with Parker and Partners, which was a lobbying firm. That helped me actually move to Sydney. I moved to Sydney in my early 20s, and I was able to go and live in Sydney in that role when we set up a Sydney office. And I'd always wanted to get out of Canberra and go and live in Sydney. I had friends who had moved up there, and it was a big smoke back then, definitely, because Canberra was much more than a small country town back in the late 90s. So I went and worked up there, and after leaving that job, someone that I had worked with in that job gave me a call one day. She had worked as a political staffer, and she said, hey, there's a job going, working for Senator Robert Hill. He's just about to be appointed as the Defence Minister in the new Howard government. There's a role going, being his private secretary. Do you want to go down and interview for that job? And I said no, because it was back in Canberra, and had a conversation with my father on the phone, and Dad said, oh my God, you have to do this. Thank God he did.
Good advice. Yeah. Good advice, Dad.
So Dad said, you have to do this. And so I went down and did the interview. And I had a really interesting interaction. So I interviewed with the Chief of Staff, and then they made me stick around and wait to meet the Minister. And when I met him as part of the questioning, he said to me, I think I was about 25, he said to me, do you think you're too young to be the diary secretary of a cabinet minister? And I got a bit indignant and said, well, it's got nothing to do with my age, and it's actually just about whether I can do the job, and I can absolutely do the job. I mean, this is just like right up my alley. Of course I could do it. I had no idea what I was doing, but I said, yeah, of course I can do it. And the funny thing is that 6 years later, when I left his office, he mentioned the fact that he had asked me that question, and the fact that I kind of got my back up a bit in that moment, he said, was one of the factors that made him think, oh yeah, I'm going to hire her. Like, she's got some spunk about her, and I think she'd be good in this office. And so I worked for him for about 6 years until he left politics. And that was back and forth between Canberra and Sydney during that time. And then moved back to Sydney, worked for a little bit in state politics. Again, a friend I had worked with said, hey, there's a job going here. If you want to move back to Sydney permanently, there's a state political role going in the opposition leader's office. Do you want to come and interview for that? So I did. Worked there for a couple of years, and then thought, okay, I'm done with politics. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm ready to do something different. And I'm actually ready to not be an executive assistant and a diary secretary anymore. I want to do something more, and I think I've learned so much. I don't quite know what that looks like. The same friend said to me, there's a job going at Leighton Holdings, a maternity leave contract as an executive assistant. Would you like to apply for that? It'll get you out of the role you're in. And so I went and interviewed for that. And during the interview, I was really clear and said, I'm happy to do this. I think this would be great. But at the end of that contract, I'm not going to stay, even if it's extended, because I do want to do something else. So I think it was a 9-month contract. So I did that. And then, similar to the first job, they were great and found me a role in the corporate affairs department after the end of that contract. And I stayed with Leighton for a number of years. I met probably one of the really big career influences in my life at that time in Penny Bingham Hall, who was my boss, who's just an amazing executive and non-executive director. And she, like lots of people before her, just kept saying, I see something, you can do this. How about we give you this? How about we give you this role? And that was right around the time of the apology to the stolen generations by Prime Minister Rudd. Our company was in the process of setting up an Indigenous engagement strategy and looking at employment across the range of Leighton companies. And Penny was leading the development of that strategy. And when it was all set up and ready to go, she said, okay, we have to have someone run this. And that needs to be a woman. And I think you should take it on. And so I thought, oh my God, there is just no way I can do this. I was terrified. And I rang people I knew, rang David Lydiard, one of my close friends, and said, do you reckon I should do this? He's like, oh yeah, you can do this. You'll be great in the job. And so I did that. And I really started to find my niche, because it was all the things around engagement and strategy and outcomes and working with, Aboriginal people and making a difference. And I just loved it. And I did that for a couple of years before moving on to Qantas and doing pretty much the same thing at Qantas. And during that time, that's kind of how I got introduced to Supply Nation. So I was at Leighton when Supply Nation was first established, and we met Michael McLeod, the founder, and I loved the concept. I was just, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And so I stayed involved. We were a founding member at Leighton. Qantas was a founding member when I went there. I went on the board for a couple of years, and then I ended up becoming the CEO. So that's kind of how I got to that point. Did 7 years there, and now I'm just doing my portfolio career, not just, but doing my portfolio career as a non-executive director.
Yeah, and that is such an extraordinary career journey. Oh my God, there's just so much in that. Even when you go back to your early stages, the comment that you made about craziness, a bit chaotic at home and going to university, and that you miss the structure, knowing that about yourself, that you organized, planned, like the diary management that came from that as well. But knowing that about yourself and finding your way through to roles that have that, a lot of your learning has been on the job. You said once you got in-house, you're like, oh my God, look, I'm learning so much, and there's so many things I can take on. I'm also having a bit of a chuckle at most of your career came your way through other people seeing in you what maybe you didn't see in yourself in the early, like the friend's mum who rang you about hey, come and do this job. Thank God your friend didn't have a license. I hope you've thanked her for that. But two things: one, that people have seen something in you, tapped you on the shoulder, but every time you've said yes until the job came up in Canberra in politics. And I love that you called your dad. Like, that was an important call. The first time. Was that really the first time you really had to interview?
No, I didn't. I interviewed for everything, but the recommendation of the opportunity has always come from someone saying, I think you would be really good for this, why don't you apply for it? So I've always had to go through the process of the interview, but I think that not finishing an undergraduate degree at university, I think for a long time I had a real imposter syndrome kind of chip on my shoulder about that. So I think that my understanding of what I was capable of, particularly in those earlier years, was pretty limited. For example, if you're working in a minister's office, I mean, I didn't know the first thing about it, but I would have thought, oh, well, I can't do that. That's not a role for me. So it wasn't until somebody said, I think you'd be really good for this, you should go down and interview, that it became an opportunity that I had even considered. So I actually went back and did a postgraduate certificate part-time while I was in the minister's office because I had this thing that I had to do something. So I did block study at UTS during that time, and I was able to work during the week and go and do a full weekend of uni lectures, and I actually really did enjoy it. I was able to keep it in that structured way, so it was still work, and then it was, okay, I've got block study Saturday and Sunday from 9 till 5, and that structure remained in place, and I think that that's what worked really well for me.
Yeah, absolutely. That need for you to find a way to study that suits your style as well at a time that seemed to be right for you as well. As you said, making a choice to do that at that time. The example that you gave, I love the interview question about, are you too young for this role? Is like 25, and that you described as, right, you're having the, being a little bit like, of course I can do this. But in your head, you were saying, can I do this? But the strength of character to say, yeah, of course I can do this. And knowing after that was absolutely the answer that you gave that really inspired that. Yep, we have to hire her. She's the one. And you use the word spunk, that he saw that spunk in you, which I see in you as well. I'm like, I almost feel like I can, see that scenario playing out and seeing the look on your face when, are you too young? And you're like,
that's exactly.
No, I'm definitely not too young. I can do that. And then backing yourself to do it. So I think that spunk would be a great word to describe you. The time when you had Penny come to you and say, hey, here's an opportunity for you. And you were like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. But she said that she needed a woman. She obviously knew that you had First Nations heritage as well. So I'm curious, did she go, oh my God, we definitely need a female with that background? I
don't know. I was very lucky that she let me be involved in the strategy planning process. So she was leading it as a direct report to the CEO. This was a huge multi-million-dollar company with lots of operating companies underneath it. I think at the time I didn't realise the significance and the size and the importance of it, of leading a strategy planning process like that. But Penny led that, but she let me be in on all of the meetings, and I was involved in like helping her pull together, it was her brain, but helping her pull together the, written work, I guess, that went behind it. So she knew that I knew what had happened from the beginning to kind of the end of that process. And I don't know whether maybe it was also that we were working in a very male-dominated environment. I mean, she's the only female executive at Leighton at that time. Maybe she just thought, well, this is a great opportunity. I don't know why. I just remember her saying, it needs to be a woman as well, and I think it should be you. And I thought, I don't know what to say. I was quite taken aback by it, but she backed me, and that's been a theme, I guess, throughout my career, where people have seen something where I would never have dreamed to put my hand up and put myself forward for something. Someone else has said, you would be good for this. Why don't you put your hand up for that? And I think every single time I have been shocked and thought, what? And then and then it's happened. And then I'm in the job, and then I go, I can do this. Of course I can do it. And I've had people say to me, even when I was later in my career, when I had much more confidence in myself, I distinctly remember a man saying to me one day, you can't do this job as the CEO of Supply Nation. So I became the CEO when I was 20 weeks pregnant.
Oh, really?
And then I had to go off on some maternity leave when I had my son. And when I came back, obviously, I'm a brand new mum. I'm a brand new CEO. There's a lot going on. There was a lot going on in the Indigenous business sector and from a policy perspective with government at that time. And we were going through a big growth phase as an organisation, and somebody said to me, you will not be able to do this job as a new mum. Never have I been more motivated to prove that person wrong, and I most definitely did.
Yeah. That's all I can imagine. That's all I can imagine.
Yeah,
Is
you
those
just
words
watch
said to
me.
Laura
You
Berry.
watch me.
Let's just put a bit more fire in the belly. Yeah, absolutely. That's extraordinary as well. So first time CEO, 20 weeks pregnant, come in, yep, I'll be a CEO, we'll do this, go on mat leave, come back at a major time and focus. I love the bravery that comes through in you saying yes. There are some excellent people in your universe, in your world, that are great talent spotters. So kudos to them, seeing those opportunities and coming to you and saying, hey, I think you can do this. But also well done to you for always saying yes and going to explore the opportunity. It was great to hear that there was that interview process, because I think that's something that would be important for you as well, to know that it was a competitive process, and even through that you've come through. And your comment about sometimes for a while that kind of that just that, university, haven't finished a degree, is that going to get in the way of my career? But realizing that you've got through all of those processes and being the successful candidate. So even whilst the job description probably said things like degree essential or whatever, skill set essential, it actually wasn't. What was required was the capability, capacity, and the approach that you take that got you through into those roles, which I think is a good message to people. Sometimes we don't put up a hand because we think I will take myself out of process because I don't have this or I don't have that, or they'll find out I don't have a completed degree or whatever the case may be. And your career story supports that so strongly, that you've been able to do roles that I reckon a lot of people go, I can't imagine that someone could do that without. My God, that opens up my opportunities and how I think about it. And that people keep coming and tapping you on the shoulder for the next thing as well. Because once you decided after 7 years at Supply Nation and you went, okay, and it was in great shape, and you went, yep, I'm comfortable with what I've done here. You've then gone on to establish a whole new stage and a next chapter of your working career, and sit on amazing boards as well that have come your way. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what that transition was about?
Yeah, there were a couple of big factors in me making that decision. 7 years at Supply Nation was a pretty decent stint as CEO, and we had come through COVID. My family and I during that period moved from Sydney, and we were obviously doing everything online. It was a pretty stressful time, kind of keeping business afloat, and all the stresses that came around the COVID period. My son was starting primary school in the last couple of years of my tenure at Supply Nation, and both my parents worked full-time their entire lives, my whole school life. They both worked really hard, and that limited their ability to spend as much time with us as their children as perhaps I would have liked. And I would have liked mum to be working in the canteen at school and coming to the school sporting things, and those were opportunities that weren't available to them because they were working hard to support the family. And so I found myself in a position where I could say, you know what, my son's about to start school and he'd like me to work in the canteen, and I want to be present, and I can't do that as a CEO of an organisation where I'm travelling all over the country all the time and travelling overseas and in meetings. And so the timing was right. I'd taken a few months off just before that. I'd asked the board to let me have 3 months sabbatical so I could just have a think about what that might look like. And I came back, and within the first week I was like, okay, no, I definitely have decided that this is what I need to do. I need to move on. And I had to give 6 months notice. So I gave that 6 months notice and worked through that exit from the organisation in a pretty orderly way. And again, I'm going to mention Penny because Penny had done almost exactly, I had watched her career. I had watched her as a female executive and somebody that I was really inspired by. And she had retired from Leighton, and for the same reasons really, to spend a bit more time with her children who were going into high school at the time. And then she wanted to start a non-executive director portfolio as well. And so I had looked at that and thought, well, that's a nice way to continue being able to work and continue to stay involved and keep your brain working in things that you want to be involved with, but without the stress of full-time running an organisation in an executive career. And so that was quite a deliberate choice on my part to do that, because I really wanted to be very present for my son as he was starting school, and I was also pretty burnt out, and I needed some time off. I mean, that whole old adage of, you know, women can have it all. Yep, we sure can. I'm not sure we can have it all at the same time, and when we do, there is a consequence to that. And I think, you know, new mum, CEO, all the, you know, COVID, all those things led to a point where I was pretty burnt out, and so I needed to step away from that. So it's not lost on me how lucky I am to be able to have made that transition.
Yeah. There might be a bit of luck in there, but I think there's also excellent planning and lots of great wisdom in there as well. So from you sharing that story, I love you took a sabbatical to actually go and think about and test out and work out what it was that you needed. Because yes, as a first-time CEO and a mum with a child that's getting into primary school and the school age and childcare and all that sort of stuff, and then when COVID came along, running a business was really tough. So I thought your sabbatical move was really, really wise. And then that gives you the clarity, doesn't it, when you come back in and you go, well, I absolutely know I do not need to be here. It is time to move on. Also wise, though, I love it when organisations are smart enough to have a CEO contract that has a 6-month notice period, because I think organisations, for the sake of the organisation and the individual, that's enough time for the CEO to honour their commitment and do a proper transition, and for the organisation to find someone as well, so that you can manage through that with that kind of deadline. Did that 6-month window gave you the clarity about that non-executive director, but do you start to put your feelers out to go, oh, where would I like to get involved? Or was this another time when things came your way?
Yeah, it's another time when things came my way a bit. So multiple people made contact with me about the Taronga role that was coming up, so I threw my hat into the ring for that. For all my board roles, and I think that this is common across all boards, people talk about there being a network and you have to know people, and that's how you get your spot. You know, you don't coldly just apply for something that you see online and then you get appointed. It's all about networking and who you know, and that's certainly been the case with all the boards that I've ever been on, including the 3 that I'm on now. So whilst, again, every single one of them I had to go through a very rigorous recruitment process for all 3, actually, the knowing that the role even existed and that there was a vacancy came about because somebody gave me a call and said, hey, did you know this is available? I think you would be really great here. Do you want to throw your hat in the ring? And so I wouldn't have known about that if I didn't have the contacts and the networks.
I think that's a great point, that people had you on their radar, and keeping those networks. You must have done a pretty good job in your career, not just at being good at what you've done, but staying connected to your network and your sponsors and supporters out there. When you think about your portfolio today, you've got the 3 boards that you're on, but I also think about your portfolio as being a mum, and you're quite active in your community as well because you've moved to regional. So when you think about that role, you and I were having a little bit of a chat before off camera about school tuck shops and all those sorts of parent.
Yeah.
Did you also?
So I thought,
took on
I'm not working full time. I can go and work on the tuck shop. So I did. And of course, then you meet, you know, we're in a new community, so I'm meeting new families and a whole bunch of new people through that process. And then somehow got sucked into going to a school P&C meeting to support another mother who was about to be put up to be the president. She said, can you come along? And I said, oh yeah, look, I'll help you out. I love this. I'll support you for the presidency. And I don't know what happened, but I got to the meeting and somehow I became the president. I adore her. She's amazing.
Are you still good friends with her?
But, I mean, it's sort of, and they said, we need someone with a bit, because the P&C runs businesses within the school. They run the canteen, they do the employment, they run the uniform shop. And so they're sort of like little mini businesses within the structure of the P&C association. And so they had said, we need someone with business experience. We need someone who knows how to manage people and do it. And so I thought, oh, well, how hard could it be? I could do this. Like, I'm not working full time, but it's a volunteer role. It is a full-time job. It is every day. I did so much recruitment. I loved it. At times it can get frustrating because it's all volunteer. It's a very different dynamic to when you're working in an organisation as a CEO, for example, and you're the boss and everyone has to do what you say, and your decision is final. When you're managing an organisation like that, it's much more about negotiating and working with volunteers and influencing those outcomes that you want to get, and maintaining good relationships with people. So I ended up doing that for 3 years, and I speaking of sabbaticals, I stepped off that in March of this year and said to myself, whilst it's not a sabbatical, I was going to take the rest of this year to say, okay, I've got my 3 boards. What else is it that I might want to do, and have the space and the time to be able to think about that, because sometimes I think you have to get a little bit bored to work out what it is that you might want to do next. And so that's kind of where I'm at now.
There's 2 things that come to mind when you share the story about the school P&C. The first thing is, with your political background and having worked in Canberra, but also New South Wales politics, so having worked in federal and state politics, I would say that's probably the most political environment that one can work in. But I would say that positions you super well to go and be a part of and lead and be the president of a school P&C, because I would say from my own experience, having done something similar, that's the second most political place you can be. It is. And it's at a community level, and it's like so much time. It's volunteering. Your organisation skills, the planning, instructional, your connections and network completely makes sense. But navigating the people aspects of that.
Yeah, and trying to instill and ensure that a governance framework sits over that all the time as well is a bit hard when you've got volunteers and people are sort of rocking into meetings late, and you're making sure that your minutes are correct, all those sorts of little governance things that people sometimes don't think about when they just think about that we're just getting a bunch of parents together to run a school fair or something like that. So I enjoyed the process, and it actually helped me connect really well with the school and the teaching executive and the principal. And I mean, I even got to sit in on principal recruitment, so as a P&C rep on the principal recruitment, and that was a really fascinating process as well. So being able to have that kind of influence on the school and the outcomes for my son, but also all the other kids there, was pretty rewarding, I have to say.
Absolutely, super purposeful. The other thing that's making me think about, you and I both have met each other through both sitting on the board of Women for Election. And one of the things that we often talk about with women is, women like, I'm not ready to be involved in politics. I don't think I'm ready to run, whether it be local council, at a state level or at a federal level. And Alicia, our CEO, and the facilitators will share stories and encouragement for women that have had experience in the local P&C, community-based organisations, because of the experience you get there around, as you said, governance, how to run meetings, how to, influence and negotiate, how to run the school budget, being involved in the recruitment. So sometimes women, especially, will underestimate all of that skill set and exposure they've had, and that can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we don't always translate the skills that we do in an everyday life to the organisation that is politics, or being an executive or whatever it might be. And sometimes we need people to see that, or to show us that that's the connection. I think Women for Election do that brilliantly in the way that they say, actually, you pretty much are a politician in your everyday life anyway because of X, Y, and Z. So we just help you formalise it and make it clear.
So Laura, you mentioned that in March you finished up on the P&C. You've got your 3 boards, and you said sometimes you have to be bored to think about what next, because there's some space and time to think about that. Is that a bit of a percolation going on at the moment?
All my other opportunities have always been when someone said, hey, what about this? Have you thought about that? That's not been happening for a little while. So it's giving me pause to have to do some of that thinking for myself about, am I happy with my 3 boards, or is there more that I want to do? and what does that look like? What is, I'd always sort of thought that my board career, I would like to grow it, essentially. So what does that look like? There's some of the conversations I'm starting to have with informal mentors, and I've always had a great executive coach who I still am in contact with today, and we chat, and she gives me great advice as well. So yeah, but slowly. I've decided that this time I'm going to do it. Not just jump at the first thing. I think even coming out of full-time work, it was like, oh, I'll do that, oh, I'll do that, oh, I'll do that, because I was terrified of not being busy, because I've always been so busy. And that didn't allow me the time to sit and think, okay, what is it that I really want to do that's going to bring me lots of joy? I mean, my job at Supply Nation was just, I love that job so much, and it was just the most perfect role for me because it ticked all the boxes and had such great resonance for me on a personal level as well. And so I think as we get older, we want to all be doing stuff that resonates more closely with. I'm not doing it just because I need a job. I want to do it because it has purpose, and it has an impact on my community, but also because I love it, and because that's where I want to spend my time. Because anything these days that takes me away from my son, it had better be good, because I want to be as involved as I can be for his schooling life. And I'm not doing tuck shop anymore, but I still want to be able to attend the school athletics carnival or whatever that might look like. A rugby game today, which is where I'm off to after we finish.
Well done on creating that space in your life to do that. I love that you're taking an unhurried approach to working out what next. It feels like it's very conscious but unhurried, which allows for things to come in. But you're also putting in that process, reaching out, connecting with your community, just to reconnect, see what's out there that might spark some opportunities. But your decision sounds like it's going to be very purposeful. How does this align with what I care about, with my skill set, with my interest, with my energy, and allows me to still be doing the stuff that I want to do, like going to rugby games to watch your son play on a Friday afternoon. That sounds perfect. Yeah. Oh, Laura, this has been a really great chat. Before we jump off, I'd love to hear from you, the people that have been important in your career. We've heard about Penny, who sounds extraordinary. I think we all need a Penny in our lives.
I think I've had the benefit of having a great network of informal mentors as much as formal mentors, and they've been men and women. In all of my roles, I've often been the youngest person there. Like if I think about sort of in my political job, so I've been able to lean on my colleagues and friends who have become friends for advice. Catherine Fitzpatrick, who I worked with in Robert Hill's office, who's now just become the CEO of the Diversity Council of Australia. She's one of those people who would be tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, what about this job? Hey, why don't you try that? Hey, why don't you? And then even very recently, her and I have had a conversation, and similar, telling her about what I'm doing now. And she's just that person that always says, you're amazing, you're great. I think she always sees in you sometimes what you don't see in yourself, and so I'm always very grateful to her. But lots of male work colleagues as well. It's not always just females. So I've had quite a great network, really, and they've been informal. And then I mentioned before my coach Margie Hartley. She's no longer my executive coach because I'm no longer an executive. But her and I just spent an hour on the phone together on the weekend because I adore her, and we still catch up. And I think that's where those little nuggets of wisdom come from, where you can still maintain those relationships and pick the brains of those people that you think are much more wise than you are.
Catherine, what a great person to have in your corner as well. Yep. And what a great appointment for her as a new CEO for the Diversity Council of Australia. I love that. And Margie Hartley is someone that I have had in my community as well, and known her for years. So Laura, last thing, if you've got a couple of pieces of great advice to other women out there about working out their journey.
We all suffer at various times from imposter syndrome. I think that's been a really strong theme for me throughout my career. And even when I have felt it very strongly, I've showed up anyway, and I've given it a crack. And often it's those moments when I think oh, I'm just going to not go to that today. I'm just not going to do that meeting today because I'm terrified of the people who are going to be around the table, or I don't want to get up and speak in front of everyone. They're going to find out I'm not as smart as they are, or whatever that might be. It's always for me those moments when I just want to turn and run the other way, but I stay and I do it anyway, that I walk out at the end of it and think, thank God I showed up today. That has been amazing. And so I think just backing yourself enough to say, even when I'm terrified, there's probably 70% of the people sitting around the boardroom table who are in exactly the same boat, but some of them are just better at faking it, you know. I love Barack Obama saying that when he went to Harvard and when he got into government and when he became the president, he said, I was so intimidated by the people around the table and, you know, at the university, and, you know, they're just regular folks. And so I think keeping that in mind is important, and being humble along the way.
We hear a lot about imposter syndrome, especially from women. I think your point about being able to get yourself there anyway, you said show up anyway and back yourself, such great advice, because there are going to be times, if we're going to have, you know, careers that, you know, change and morph, where we're going to have to come into spaces that don't feel 100% comfortable, and where we might not be the most experienced person or the smartest person, but showing up anyway. And it's always surprising what you do have to contribute, or the value that you do have, the things that you don't expect. There's value. Others know that when they choose you to be there. So thank you for sharing the back yourself. I love that. Staying humble, great advice as well. We know that in Australia we particularly like that trait of humility. So great advice. Laura, it's been a pleasure and a delight. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today on Her Time, Her Place. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have. Thanks very much for having me. I've loved it.
Yeah, it's been a great story. And a little thank you to everyone who's listening. It's been a great episode here with Laura Berry today. Watch out for next week's episode. It's always on a Friday, and we'll hear from another fabulous woman. Thank you, folks, and bye from me.